The FIA has had a year of criticism and has embroiled itself in controversy as its president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, has come up with rule changes and made statements which have infuriated drivers and fans. Now, though, the sport's governing body has taken it even further, and when fans start coming up with logos calling your organization fascists, you know things may have gone too far. Today, I'll check out the insane rule change the FIA has made to try and control the drivers and what it could mean, so don't go anywhere. While Lewis Hamilton's debut in a Ferrari has been dominating the headlines this week, the FIA have been changing the sport's rules to try and contain the voice of drivers like Lewis. Drivers speaking out against the FIA and their policies has been a problem for the organization this year, as anger and upset over the inconsistency of penalties being applied in races and the insane penalties being issued for out-of-race actions has brought the organization into disrepute. The change to the rules is an update to the stewards' penalty guidelines that could result in Formula One drivers collecting fines or championship point penalties for swearing or other sporting code violations. These are an extension of the FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem's contentious call last season for F1 drivers to limit their use of profanity. The updates have targeted the section that talks about driver misconduct. The FIA defines misconduct as the general use of language, written or verbal, gesture and/or sign that is offensive, insulting, coarse, rude or abusive, and might reasonably be expected or be perceived to be coarse or rude or to cause offense, humiliation or to be inappropriate. Assaulting, which is elbowing, kicking, punching, hitting, etc., and the incitement to do any of the above. The punishments for committing these misconducts are now clearly laid out in the sporting regulations. The first offence is a fine of €40,000 for an F1 driver, rising to €80,000 and a suspended 1-month suspension on the second offence. A third infraction gets you a fine of €120,000 with a 1-month suspension plus deduction of championship points. I think we can all agree that a driver assaulting another driver is completely unacceptable, and the penalties that the FIA have detailed are more than fair. But the same penalty being issued for things like swearing over the team radio, or calling your car fucked in a press conference, or for giving a competitor the middle finger as you pass them, as Liam Lawson did to Sergio Perez last season, is going to cause trouble with the drivers. The actions that these penalties can be applied to go further though. Similar penalties will be granted for any words, deeds, or writings that have caused moral injury or loss to the FIA, its bodies, its members, or its executive officers, and more generally on the interest of motorsport and on the values defended by the FIA, and any public incitement to violence or hatred. To put that in simple words, questioning or criticizing the FIA or its president Mohammed Ben Sulayem in any way from now on will result in a €40,000 fine for the first time, an €80,000 fine and a suspended 1-month suspension for the second time, and the third time will get you a €120,000 fine, a 1-month ban, and a points deduction. The FIA has also retained the same fines for the general making and display of political, religious, and personal statements or comments, notably in violation of the general principle of neutrality promoted by the FIA under its statutes, unless previously approved in writing by the FIA for international competitions, or by the relevant ASN for national competitions within their jurisdiction, while mandating that drivers make a full public apology for their remarks and retraction of their comments. There is a scenario then that the Drivers' or Constructors' Championship could be decided by a driver swearing over the team radio, or someone like Hamilton could be banned for a month for supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, or a driver who's particularly vocal over team radio like Verstappen or Tsunoda or Hajar could pick up points reductions for venting their frustrations. The obvious example to use here would be the infractions that saw Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen punished last season, with Verstappen being used as an example to the rest of the drivers to show what will happen if you go against Mohammed Ben Sulayem. While last season Verstappen was sentenced to do community work in Rwanda for saying his car was fucked in a press conference, this season he would receive a €40,000 fine. Leclerc was fined €10,000, half of which was suspended if he didn't do it again within 12 months for the exact same offence. This season, that would be a €40,000 fine. The vast difference in punishments that the two drivers received didn't go unnoticed, with Verstappen penalised far more harshly than Leclerc, though the steward said that Leclerc's punishment was reduced because he was apologetic immediately after. Perhaps drivers will be able to reduce their points deductions for calling the FIA idiots by buying Ben Sulayem a milkshake right after as an apology. Before I talk more about this baffling rules update, if you enjoy the content we bring you and want to catch all the F1 news in the run-up to the 2025 season, then make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to F1 Reverse. After 3 years of bringing you all the latest F1 news, we're closing in on 100,000 subscribers, which is incredible, so thank you very much to everyone who's helped make that happen. While the changes to how penalties will be dished out for swearing or inappropriate gestures are wildly disproportionate to the offence, the most concerning part of the changes are those that will punish drivers for any words, deeds or writings that have caused moral injury or loss to the FIA, its bodies, its members or its executive officers, and more generally on the interest of motorsport and on the values defended by the FIA and any public incitement to violence or hatred. Last season, the FIA were heavily criticised by the drivers and the Grand Prix Drivers Association for the rule changes they made and how penalties were handed out during races and for actions off the track. Verstappen was punished for saying his car was fucked in a post-race press conference, and in response he restricted his answers in the FIA news conference at the Singapore Grand Prix, before hosting a private news conference to speak to the media in the paddock. The world champion said, "I find it, of course, ridiculous what happened, so why should I give them full answers? Because it's very easily apparent you get a fine or some kind of penalty, so I prefer not to speak a lot, save my voice. We can do the interviews also somewhere else if you need some answers or questions asked." McLaren's Lando Norris said he thought the Dutchman's penalty was pretty unfair, adding, "I don't agree with any of it." Then Mercedes driver Lewis Hamilton said the penalty was a bit of a joke and that Verstappen should refuse to do whatever punishment the FIA demanded. "It's the pinnacle of the sport," the 7-time world champion said. "Mistakes are made. I certainly wouldn't be doing it, and I hope Max doesn't do it." Verstappen said he had been punished to set a precedent, and that with me, they wanted to set an even bigger example, I guess, which for me is a bit weird, because I didn't swear at anyone, I just said one thing about my car. All of these statements would, of course, now be punishable by the FIA. But all of this began when the FIA president decided that he didn't want drivers swearing anymore, saying that he wanted drivers to behave in a way that differentiate between our sport, motorsport and rap music. Hamilton also took issue with Mohammed Ben Sulayem for the language used in that statement, saying that it had a racial tone to it that he didn't like. Hamilton said, "Saying rappers is very stereotypical. If you think about it, most rappers are black. So when it says, 'we're not like them,' those are the wrong choice of words. There is a racial element there." If Hamilton were to make that same statement now, it has to be assumed that he would receive a punishment from the FIA, as would every other driver who said that the statement was uncalled for or inappropriate. There will be a pushback against this rule change from the drivers, but how they go about it will be difficult. It's clear from the rule change that the FIA are putting themselves in a position where they can crack down on individuals who try to stand up against the authoritarian direction that the FIA is being taken by its president. This is the moment for the Grand Prix Drivers Association to flex its muscles and take a stand. The organization typically does its work behind closed doors and only intervenes when it is absolutely necessary. But with the collective might of the drivers behind it, and the association safe from the individual fines, point deductions and bans that the FIA have given themselves the power to give out, the GPDA has the ability to organize and enact collective action against the FIA. The sport simply cannot run without the drivers. If the FIA wants to make itself untouchable with punishments for drivers that speak out against it, then the GPDA is the way that the drivers can fight back. What do you think of the rule changes? Are you worried about the authoritarian control the FIA are taking over the sport? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.